Okay, so you want to know the best, most endgame viable, most consistent version of Whirlwind for the Barbarian. That is what I'm going to show you in this video. We're going to talk about the equipment, the skill tree, the Paragon board, and give you everything you need to have success whirlwinding with the Barbarian so you can spin to win. Let's get into it. Alrighty, so the first thing we got to do is go over the equipment so that you know what gear to look for, what roles, what aspects and stuff that you need to unlock the true potential of this build. And I do cover all sorts of other classes. I've already done some of the best sorcerer builds, so remember to subscribe down below and I will get to your favorite class and all the top meta builds for you in detail very soon. But okay, we'll just go in order here. For the helm, we want to get cooldown reduction. That is absolutely mandatory. And then after that, we're going to look for things like armor, all stats, and strength. And then the aspect that we're going to put on our helm is going to be the whirlwind periodically pulls enemies towards you, the grasping whirlwind aspect. Then for the chest armor, we are going to be taking advantage of a unique called Rage of Haragoth, and that is because we are getting up to a 40% chance to reduce the cooldown of your non-ultimate skills by 1.5 seconds when you inflict bleeding on elites, and we are going to be doing a bleeding variant of Whirlwind, so obviously this chest is absolutely amazing. And of course, we've got the super famous Gore's Devastating Grips as our gloves. The Whirlwind explodes after it ends, dealing up to 26% of the total base damage dealt surrounding enemies as fire. It's going to give us another way to scale our damage while we are whirlwinding. And then for the pants, Temerity end up finding their way in a lot of different builds in Diablo 4 because you're going to be getting the effects that heal you beyond 100%, are going to give us a barrier of up to 80%. It's going to help us stay in there in the action and have a lot of toughness. Now, if you don't have Temerity, it's okay. You can go with some damage reduction pants and that'll be just fine. You just want to get toughness and damage reduction and barriers and stuff like that from your pants armor slot. Then on the boots, we want Fury cost reduction, Berserking duration, movement speed to help us while we're speed farming, getting around towns and all of that. Movement speed helps us a lot of areas, not just when we're actually in the dungeons and stuff. And then speed or all stats to scale up everything that we're doing. And the aspect that we're going to put on our boots is the While Unstoppable. And for 4 seconds after, you gain 25% increased movement speed and can move freely through enemies. That is mandatory for Whirlwind. We're going to be able to get around faster and just keep right on going, whirlwinding wherever we want to. Then for the amulet, there's a couple different ways we can go. We obviously want cooldown reduction for sure. We want defensive skills for sure. We want Fury cost reduction ideally. And then in that last spot, you can go, you have a little bit of leeway there. You can go with like damage reduction while fortified. Or if you're really going like the speed farming variant, you can go with movement speed there to help you get around even faster. And then the aspect that we're going to put on our amulet is skills deal up to 30% increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast and receiving the maximum benefit while you have full primary resource. So we want to stay full on that bar, generate fury, and just crank out a ton of damage with our whirlwind. And then for our 2 ring slots, we want just basically the same thing on both slots. We're looking for crit damage, crit chance, vulnerable damage, and then resource generation so we can keep our fury as high as possible to synergize with the build, and really not a whole lot of leeway right there. That's kind of like the 4 things you're going to want. The 2 different aspects that we're going to put on here is going to be whenever you cast a shout skill, its cooldown is reduced by up to 1.9 seconds per nearby enemy, so you want to make sure you're doing your shouts when you are close to a bunch of enemies, and there's even some that synergize better when you're around enemies as well, so you can kind of double dip with that. And then your other one right here is going to be your shout skills generate 4 fury per second while active. So you can see we've got a lot of resource generation to make sure we're always keeping that up and never having fury troubles. Then for our weapon over here on the far left, we're going to put a 2-handed mace, and we're going to be going with crit damage, vulnerable damage, strength, and damage to close. Now on this one, there is a little bit of leeway. So you definitely want crit damage and vulnerable. Those 2 are non-negotiable. After that, you can get things like core damage, all stats, damage to close, strength. You just want something that's going to hit your damage multipliers for sure. Something like strength and damage to close right here would be fine. If you had core damage on there or something, that would be fine. You just want to be scaling up your damage as much as possible on the weapon slot. And then the aspect that we're going to be putting right here is Whirlwind's crit strike chance is increased by 16% for each second it is channeled, up to 48%. Absolutely ridiculous aspect, and that's an amazing one to put on a weapon to get that boost all the way up to 48. Then for the weapon over on the far right, it's going to be pretty much the same drill, the same thing I explained, the same stats on the two-handed mace over there on the left, but except for this one, we're going to put a two-handed sword. You can see right here, the Demon Blade of Limitless Rage, and that refers to the aspect that we're going to be putting down here of each point of fury you generate while at maximum fury grants your next core skill 4% increased damage up to 60%. So we're getting two really huge ones on our two-handed weapons. And then in the middle, we're going to be putting a couple legendary swords, and we're going to be going for the same drill, same exact stats. You want those things that we already kind of talked about. And the two aspects we're going to put are deal 25% increased damage while you have a barrier, and that's also going to synergize with our temerity pants that we talked about a little bit ago. And then the other one over here is whenever you deal direct damage while berserking, inflict 30% of the base damage dealt as additional bleeding damage over 5 seconds, and you'll start to see that really synergizes with the build and helps our damage be super consistent. Then for the gems, the ones in the armor might be a little bit negotiable, but the rubies are just super consistent value. You definitely want the skulls in your jewelry to get the armor, and then you definitely want the emeralds right here in your weapons to scale up that crit damage. Okay, so then for the skill tree, I'm going to walk you through and kind of talk about what we're picking and why we're picking so you can go along in game if you would like. But for our generator, we're going with Lunging Strike, going to help us kind of get up in there in the action and pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, we're taking Whirlwind. We're going to max that out, and then we're going to come up here to the Enhanced Whirlwind. We're going to go over to the right to while using a slashing weapon, Whirlwind going to inflict 40% of its base damage as bleed. So we're going with the bleed version of Whirlwind, and then we're setting up the build to synergize around that and get a bunch of value out of the bleeding Whirlwind damage. Then we'll come down here a little bit to the left, and we'll take 3 points into Pressure Point so that our core skills have a high chance of proccing Vulnerable on enemies. And our core skill, obviously right here with Whirlwind, going to keep Vulnerable up super consistent. Okay, so then coming on down here to the defensive skills, we've got a couple different shouts that are going to be over on our skill bar in the Rallying Cry and the Challenging Shout. Now for Rallying Cry, we want to head on up top here to get the Generate Extra Fury and extra resource generation. And then down here on our Challenging Shout, we want to come over to the left and take while Challenging Shout is active, you gain 3 Fury each time you take damage. As you can see, you're starting to get a theme of the build. We want to keep our Fury up super consistent because we have to stay high on Fury to be getting maximum value out of the build. And then if we slide on down to our brawling skills, we're going to take a point into Warcry. And this is the one that I was talking about earlier that we want to make sure we cast it around as many enemies as possible, because as we slide up here, you can see if at least 6 enemies are nearby when you cast Warcry, you get additional increased damage on top of everything that we're getting here with Warcry. And then we're going to take Booming Voice to increase the duration up to 24% of our shout skills. And then up here, we're going to take shout skills also heal all allies by 3% of their maximum life per second. And this does apply to yourself. It's not just your allies. Heal allies applies to you as well, and that will synergize with the rubies that we're putting in our armor as well, so we can generate more life per second and stay in the fight while we're whirlwinding. And then heading down after that, we're going to put a point into Aggressive Resistance, mainly to get to Prolific Fury, while Berserking Fury generation increased by 18%. And then as we head down to the Weapon Mastery skills, it's on the right side of the tree, so I got to move the screen around a little bit so you can read what I'm talking about. But okay, so we want to put 3 points in both Pit Fighter and No Mercy, because we're going to be getting more multipliers for our damage, this 9x right here, and then we're going to take a little bit of damage reduction to distant enemies, and then this No Mercy right here, this increased crit chance against immobilized, stun, or slowed. That's going to synergize with this super important 1 point that we put right here in Hamstring, where your bleeding effects are going to slow enemies by 10%. So definitely want to pay attention right there on the Weapon Masteries section. And then we do want to put 1 point into Thick Skin, so we can come down to Counter Offensive and put 3 points in it, so that while you have Fortify over 50% of your maximum life, you deal 12% increased damage. It's another X multiplier for us. Then as we move down to the ultimate skills section, we do want to put 3 into heavy-handed, because it's going to give us another X multiplier on our two-handed weapons. And then we're going to put 1 point into Tempered Fury, so we can put 3 into Invigorating Fury to get a little bit more sustain. And obviously, Wrath of the Berserker is amazing, and both of the enhancements are worth taking on that one. And then lastly, down here on the bottom right, we've got our key passive, Unbridled Rage, to make our core skills do another X increased multiplier and also cost more Fury. But that's why we have so much Fury generation to synergize in this build, so we can take this key passive and still be able to sustain it. And then for our skill bar, we do want to put two-handed sword expertise. Obviously, that's what we're using for our whirlwind up here. And then we're going to put our shouts, rallying cry, war cry, and challenging shout, along with wrath of the berserker for the big moments to get those big bursts. And obviously, we're going to be using our lunging strike to kind of move forward and dash in. And the main source of the whole build is whirlwind right here. So kind of any form that you want to put those on, like 1, 2, 3, 4, A, S, D, F, all sorts of stuff. But the thing you're going to be holding down the most is going to be whirlwind. So take note of that. And then all 4 of your skills, you're going to kind of most of the time just be using in rotation. So whatever way you kind of want to set that up, that's how your skill board is going to look. Okay, now hear me out. I'm going to do my best to go through the Paragon board quickly for you and help you out, but this is a little bit of a difficult section, and remember, this build is an end game build. This is a build that you strive for, so you're going to want to make sure you get to a high level, you do your renown and all of that, so you have the different Paragon points to spend available to you. So when we start, we're going to be putting in territorial as our glyph right here on the first node. We're going to come up the left side of our first board right here and head out up top here. But we do want to take the blue nodes, most of them here on this board. We're going to come up the right side first, and then after our glyph, we're going to come up the left side and head on out to the weapons master board. And we do want to rotate it in a way where we can get to our glyph super fast down here on the bottom right, but we do want to head to the left, and we want to take the movement speed after elites and some of the nodes over there. We're going to be putting in the martial glyph right there. And then we head out to the right to put in the Warbringer board. We're going to rotate it so that the glyph is kind of up there in that top left quadrant. The glyph we're going to socket in is Wrath. There's a bunch of blue nodes we want to take. We want to take the ones up north where we get the physical damage, the dexterity, and then the physical damage right there. But we want to wrap all the way around to take some of these big nodes where we get Fury, Fury on kill, and then also the Warbringer legendary node where for every 75 Fury you spend, you get 12% of your maximum life as Fortify, which, as you saw, synergizes with our build very nicely. Then we're going to go back out of the board up top to the north, and we're going to rotate it in a way so that we've got the glyph socket kind of right in the south middle. There's a couple blue nodes we want to be taking around there, and then we want to come out to the left, and we want to make sure that we grab these nodes up here for vulnerable damage. You basically always want vulnerable damage whenever you can get it in this game. And hang in there with me. We're on board number 5. We're going to take Bone Breaker. We're going to rotate it so the glyph is on the top right quadrant. We're going to socket the Exploit glyph right here. There are a couple blue nodes we want to get right up here with the damage reduction while healthy, the dexterity, and some of the stuff right there. And then we want to come right out up north to our 6th and final board, which is going to be Flawless Technique. You want the glyph kind of right here on the center right, and the glyph we're going to socket is Disembowel. And then there are a few noteworthy blue nodes that you want to make sure you scoop up, like your physical damage and all of that. The crit strike damage obviously is going to be crit strike damage is kind of like vulnerable. You always want it if you can get it. So, okay, I'm trying not to bore you by spending 45 minutes on the Paragon board, and I hope that kind of helped you kind of see the overall landscape of what we're trying to accomplish in the Paragon board with the different boards that we use and the different glyphs that we socket and some of the more important nodes that we want to make sure we're taking note of on the board. And then there you have it. You are good to go. You are ready to spin to win. And if you do this build, you will be wrecking in no time, farming content super easily with the God tier Whirlwind Barbarian, one of the better builds in the game just for general utility, farming, and overall play, whether you're farming XP or you're doing Nightmare Dungeons or anything like that. There's a few different variations of play for the Barb. There's Hoda that I'm gonna have to cover in a future video, and a couple different variations and ways to play the Whirlwind Barbarian, but I like this bleed Whirlwind style the best if I'm gonna recommend like one Whirlwind style for you to play and try out as you move on into the end game for a build to strive towards. So I'm gonna be covering other builds. I just did a super in-depth guide for the Sorcerer. I will also drop that one down below if you're looking for the best end game build for the Sorcerer to crank out a ton of damage. And I'm looking forward to covering other classes soon here on the channel as well. So I appreciate all of you. Remember to subscribe on your way out if you enjoy Diablo 4 content. I'll see you soon in the next video. Peace.